In Fort Myers, Florida, a killer confesses to a grisly crime, but the police cannot find a body. A serial killer may go free unless police find the evidence to put him behind bars. In each case, forensic scientists must find proof of the crime in the bones of the murder victim, using scientific studies of human decay to find out when the victim died so the killer may be traced, hoping to prove there is no perfect crime, that dead men do talk. Attaching a name to the body will not be easy. To shed more light on this mysterious case, police must determine the identity of the victim. In Fort Myers, Florida, police will have the opposite problem: a crime without a body.
911, what is your emergency?
Yeah.
Okay, one moment, sir. Betty, I have a man on the phone advised he just murdered someone.
In a police communication center in Fort Myers, Florida, a 911 call will lead to the discovery of a grisly crime dating to 1989.
911, what is your emergency?
I'd like to report a homicide on Piney Road.
Murder, where did it happen?
I'm only calling in because I should confess to what I did.
And you did it?
Yeah.
The caller reports a murder he has recently committed.
Why did you do that?
I don't know. That's normal memory.
He says he's thought of turning himself in, but hasn't decided yet.
Turn yourself in?
I'm thinking about it.
All right, are you going to wait there for us?
The 911 call is traced to a shopping center phone booth. The operator tries to keep the killer on the line, while a message goes out to police units in the area.
Lake County 2, 11-1, 1065, a possible signal 5 at Coral Gate Shopping Center. Orange Grove and Pondella. Orange Grove and Pondella.
Officer Paul Rose monitors the call and finds no one at the shopping center phone booth where the call originated. But less than a mile from the shopping center, he has spotted a possible suspect. The suspect had been walking hurriedly at the side of the road, away from the direction of the shopping center. The suspect, whose name is Paul Klein, quickly admits he made the 911 call confessing murder. He is advised of his rights and taken into custody. The previous night, he'd broken into a house and strangled an elderly woman on the couch where she lay. There is no sign of anything missing. Robbery had not been the motive. Lieutenant Jeff Taylor, entering the house, found the victim just as Klein had described her. But he would soon find out that she had not been Klein's first victim.
Klein related to me that he heard voices, and the voices made him to become angry. And every time he became angry, he had to kill someone. And when he said that, it indicated to me that perhaps there were other victims also. And I asked him at that time if he had killed before, and he said yes, twice.
Klein had murdered one other woman in a trailer some months before. But his first victim had been a friend named Danny Webster, killed a year and a half earlier in August 1989. Luring Webster into a field to look for aluminum cans, Klein had beaten him to death with a lead pipe. A crime scene search unit scours the area where the killing allegedly occurred.
There you go, I got something over here.
Oh yeah? What is
Brown
it?
work boot.
Does it look like it's been there a while, or?
We had information that we believed at the time that the crime was committed, the original act of the homicide was committed in this field. So what we did a grid search of this whole field, and upon doing that, we located a shoe. It's early to tell right now if it actually belongs to the victim, but we believe there's a good possibility that it does. Therefore, once we found the shoe, we have to treat it as evidence.
According to Klein's confession, he had returned to the scene of the crime 3 days after the murder. Arriving at night to avoid detection, he swam with the body to a marshy swamp island, where he dismembered the corpse with an axe and a paring knife. After disposing of Webster's body so thoroughly and getting away with his crime for a year and a half, Klein has now decided to confess. The crime scene search officers find a small piece of bone, photographed exactly where it is found. But they will not find a body. Without a body, police do not have enough evidence to convict. Detective Jack Schell interrogated Klein under tight security. Klein had once bent a stop sign with his bare hands.
We needed a positive identification of the body. Although we had somebody telling us who they killed and that they killed them, we still have to prove who was killed, how they were killed, and when they were killed to the best we can. It's the corpus delicti, the body of the crime. We have to be able to establish that, yes, this person died and that this person did it.
I guess I must have actually hit him about, I don't know, maybe more than 200 times. I'm not sure. I just kept whacking at everything. I hit him in the legs, the arms, everywhere I could get. Face. Just his head region was more where I actually hit more than anything. But that was after he was already dead too. You know, I just kept hitting.
Klein's confession by itself is not enough to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. The police must find the body. Klein pointed out the marshy island where he says he left the dismembered corpse. But even if police can find it, it will be hard to identify after a year and a half in the swamp. The case will go to Dr. William Maples of the University of Florida, a world-renowned authority on the identification of skeletal remains. In 1991, he led the team that exhumed the bones of President Zachary Taylor, who died mysteriously in 1850. Some historians say Taylor was poisoned, making him, not Abraham Lincoln, the first American president to be assassinated. After testing the dead president's hair and fingernails for poison, Dr. Maples laid the body and the assassin theories to rest. In the case of Paul Klein, it is immediately clear to Maples he is dealing with a possible psychopath totally unaffected by death.
Well, bodies in Florida tend to bloat very rapidly. Florida is known for its sunshine and good weather, especially in the area of Fort Myers where this took place. So the first thing that our killer attempted to use was a paring knife. It is very flexible, it is light, it may be sharp, it may be serrated, and may be very, very effective sometimes in cutting up bones. The so-called Ginsu steak knife is amazingly flexible and yet will go right through bone if it's properly used. So our killer sticks the knife into this bloated body and outpours all over him yellow and green discharge, foul-smelling fluid. This is enough to really disturb anyone, even if they weren't disturbed to start with.
But the killer's use of a paring knife may be the key to identifying the victim's remains and corroborating Klein's confession.
If we take a paring knife and rub along a stick or a bone or whatever the case might be, you notice that the blade jumps and chatters. This chatter produces an interrupted type of cutting on the bone surface. And we look for this evidence of chattering, and that tells us how flexible or inflexible the blade is. On the other hand, if we take a good heavy bladed sharp knife and cut on the bone, it doesn't chatter, it simply shaves the bone. And this is evidence of a heavier, less flexible blade.
Crime scene search officers arrive at the island where Klein left the dismembered body. If they can find bones that were sliced with a paring knife, they'll have strong proof that Klein's confession is real.
Hey, Chris. We're gonna earn this one. We're gonna earn this one.
Klein was to have accompanied the officers himself, but in the boat going over to the island, he'd been much too excited at the prospect of seeing his victim's remains. For their own safety, the officers decided to search without Klein's assistance. It's a serious mission, for unlike his other crimes, the murder of Danny Webster was vicious enough to send Klein to Floretta's electric chair, or else prove beyond all doubt he's a dangerous psychopath to be put away indefinitely.
He seemed like a normal person. You didn't notice any psychological problems or anything, but the more it went on and the more I realized he was telling me the truth and that these gory facts he was telling me really did happen, then I'm beginning to think, you know, we got a real weirdo here that can do this and talk about it so calmly and so intelligently.
Klein had a nickname he didn't like. Because his arms extended out from his body as he walked, kids made fun of him, calling him Popeye.
What I did is,
He'd killed Danny Webster for calling him names, repeating time after time it was because Webster had harassed him.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. Everything's all right. I just have to go ahead and, I don't know, I think I feel almost a little dizzy for that matter. I have to eat a little bit of something, take my medication.
Is that person in the march Danny Webster?
Yes, ma'am. Yep, that's him. Or that was him.
Why did you
kill him? He was always being cruel and, I don't know, calling me names and stuff, and I decided to go for it.
Okay.
Watch your head, Dave.
Hey, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate everything.
Watch your head.
The island where Klein left the body is partially submerged and subject to changing tides. The logistics of finding evidence are very difficult. Finally, more bones are found. The body is in pieces, just as Klein had said.
I asked him, how did you take this body apart? I believe his response was just like I always do. I took off the left leg, the left arm, the head, the right arm, the right leg, in a circular motion like that. And he'd used a hatchet, axe. He told me where the axe was, which was in another state. Him and his father had went to their home in another state and left it there before he came back.
Pieces of bone found on the marshy island are sent to the FBI for examination. The FBI confirms that the bones show evidence of hatchet trauma. An axe or hatchet had been used to cut the body apart. But according to his harrowing confession, Klein had reserved special treatment for the victim's head.
Yep, got his head off with the paring knife, and the head, there was more or less like in pieces, and I tossed it right on an embankment about 25, 30 feet from the mangroves, and I stuck it there for like, I had it there for like the longest time, I guess something like 3.5 months.
He told me that he took the head and kept it to come back and visit it. He would visit it every night and talk to it. And after about 2 weeks, it got to the point where it was deteriorated to the extent that he didn't want it anymore, so he discarded it.
Klein had carried the head around with him in a paper sack, often engaging it in conversation. Spotting a police car on one occasion, he panicked and threw the head into a waterway, but he could not remember where. A police dive team searches the area where Klein may have discarded Danny Webster's skull. It is an area of murky waters, frequented by alligators. They find nothing but coconuts. Unless the head is found, it may be impossible to identify the remains as those of Danny Webster. In the case of Danny Webster in Florida, police have only part of the body. The killer has done a thorough job of dismembering and scattering the remains. Filling in the grisly details of murder and mutilation will be the job of forensic science. At the Lee County Sheriff's Office in Fort Myers, Florida, Paul Klein has confessed to the murder of Danny Webster. But the killer has carved up the body and disposed of its head. The few bones found on a marshy island are 1.5 years old. It may be impossible to prove beyond a reasonable doubt they are the bones of Danny Webster. Klein had been relentless in attempting to conceal his crime. Before decapitating the body, he had pulled out the teeth, knowing they're often used to identify the victim.
He explained that instead of digging a normal grave-type hole, that he dug a round hole as if to put trash or something in it. He set the victim down in it, buttocks first, and shoved him into the hole by his shoulders. When he didn't go in all the way, he jumped up and down on the body until he was able to get it deep enough into the hole that he thought he had it hidden. Then he pulled weeds and dirt over it and laid on his belly, and his words were, slithered back into the water like a big gator and swam back home.
Is Klein a psychopath, or is he a man who has plotted and planned the perfect crime?
Okay, a perfect crime. Let's think, how about Jimmy Hoffa? How far have we gotten on Jimmy Hoffa solving? We don't even know where he is. How can we solve the crime if we don't know where he is? You see, so somebody's already thought of this. And so, you know, if you leave the body, it's a good chance you're going to be caught. Because there's all these hair and fiber section of the FBI and the forensic anthropologists of the world all over. All my colleagues were out there trying to figure this out. But if you don't have a body, how do you know you've got a crime, you see?
Detective Harry executed a search warrant at Klein's apartment. It was soon apparent Klein may have learned the techniques of killing from books.
We found probably every true life murder story that was ever written, like Son of Sam, The Hillside Strangler. It was just book after book after book.
From sparse remains, forensic science must identify the body of Danny Webster. If not, the case may be lost. In order to corroborate Klein's confession and make the case hold up in court, anthropologist William Maples will try to determine the age, sex, and race of the partial skeleton.
This is the shaft of the bone. This is the epiphysis, the end of the bone. And they start from separate origins in a child. And they slowly change shape.
As the epiphyses reach the end of their growth, they become fused to the shafts of bone. On the bones in this case, fusion is not yet complete. Maples is able to put the age of the victim between 17 and 23, the same age as Danny Webster. Determining sex is almost always a matter of studying the pelvic bones, narrower in males than females. The victim in this case was clearly a male. But determining race will be more difficult, especially with the head missing. Dr. Maples uses the femur or thigh bone to distinguish Caucasian and black. In a Caucasian, the femur is bowed enough to allow his knuckle to pass under.
In the case of a black individual, the shaft tends to be much flatter and straighter, and there is no anterior bowing. The amount of curvature in the femur clearly indicated to me that we were dealing with a white male.
Finally, Maples examines the bones for evidence of the chatter marks that a paring knife would leave if used to dismember the body.
Killers, by and large, aren't stupid enough to use paring knives, so we don't have a lot of evidence of that.
But the results are positive. By the end of his examination, Maples has conclusive proof that the bones match the description of Danny Webster. The necessary corroboration of Klein's confession is in place. For Lieutenant Jeff Taylor, the case is closed.
Paul Klein is presently in an institution in Chattahoochee, Florida, for mentally insane.